Hello, I'm Jennifer Branch. Today I'm going to show you how to paint a hummingbird. Let's paint. I start by painting a loose wash over everything that isn't a hummingbird or a flower. And by loose, I mean leave lots of whites. Just let your brush dance around and enjoy playing with the pigment. This is fun. There should be lots of negative areas where you didn't have any paint at all. The whites are really what makes the painting sparkle. Here we are, and it's time to start while it's still wet, so work really fast. It's time to start dropping some phthalo green in, and again, just let your brush dance around the painting. Notice that there's some areas that will give backwashes because you've let them dry a little bit, because it takes a minute to cover even a tiny painting with paint. I never work in one tiny area. If you work in one tiny area, it makes your painting look, like it's cut and paste. I don't want to cut out picture of a hummingbird. If I wanted something that looked like a photograph of a hummingbird, or I wanted a pasted picture, I could get into collage or photography. I want a painting that's an exciting feeling of a hummingbird. You may not see it, but this is part of underpainting. Everything that you paint, if it's a blue, everything on top of it's going to be a little bit cooler and recede a bit. If it's the bright greens and yellows, then it's warmer. It's going to come more towards you, and it's also going to glow a little bit. Anything that has yellow or quinacridone gold, such as a green, it makes it glow. And remember, this hummingbird has a little bit of green in it, so you want it to glow. It's a good tiny little jewel. Now here's some ultramarine heavy. I want a stronger dark to really make this hummingbird stand out. My first wash, as you can tell, it looked pretty dark going on, but it lightens considerably. I think it lightens to about half as dark once it's dried. And I'm using a lot more pigment in the second wash with ultramarine blue. And every wash I'll start using a little bit more pigment, so that way you have some translucent areas and some opaque areas. And it's the play between these areas that really makes it. I'm taking the time to negatively paint around some of these flowers. I'm not going to want a lot of detail in the salvia. I want the salvia to just be a blur of purple and just kind of say, oh yeah, flowers there. They're not the important part of the painting. The important part of the painting is the beautiful hummingbird. Now, the really neat thing, and in a later step we'll really get into this about painting the hummingbird, is they're iridescent. They sparkle, and you can achieve that effect if you just let your brush dance and skip and hit and miss. And the layers upon layers of pigment are what really give that sparkly iridescent effect. Use the pigments around. Blur some of the bright ultramarine pinks with the background. It's still soaking wet. It's only dried in a couple areas, and you can use those pigments. Notice ultramarine pink is kind of a weird pigment. It layers very easily. If it goes on very transparent or very opaque, and it just depends on how you're doing it. Now I'm starting to add some more darks. You see, you thought that ultramarine blue that I put down earlier was dark. It wasn't that dark once it was dried. If you achieve that in a couple areas, it gives you the stained glass effect where, you know, you're looking through stained glass and there's little areas of transparency and areas that are more opaque, and it's a wonderful feeling of depth. If you just do it in the first layer or two, it just looks dull in comparison. Now I'm very carefully going and really pulling in paint to start the shadows. Just pulling in paint around, a little bit of ultramarine blue. Very carefully painting the eye. Have to have a lot of detail. That's where the painting's in focus, is the hummingbird's eye and the neck. A little bit on the beak. The wings are going to be blurred, so that's one reason to bring the paint from behind it in, because that's what happens when it blurs. Use a little bit of the ultramarine pink under here and just blur it with the outside, because remember, I'm not doing a cutout. Painting a hummingbird, and they are always in motion. Now I'm just adding just little dashes of color. Remember, I'm going to want the shimmery look of the hummingbird. So this is really the underlaying layer, anything that glows as it's done. So the ultramarine pink done very lightly, quinacridone gold, some of the bright phthalo green. Just let your brush dance around. Remember, that's the area where you want the fussy detail. You don't want fussy detail in the flowers because you don't really want people looking at the flowers. You want them looking at your beautiful hummingbird. This hummingbird's from a photo, obviously. I can't sketch that fast. And it's from these beautiful gardens up in Maine, in Northeast Harbor, called Thalia Gardens. Just lovely. These little round hummingbirds seem like little tiny ping pongs on all the flowers. Beautiful. I've never seen anything like how tame these hummingbirds seem. I mean, you don't want to pet them, obviously, but they're just sitting right there. I've gotten so many beautiful pictures of hummingbirds from there over the years. I think they're tanking up for their, fall trip. Okay, a little bit of dark in there, and I want to mix it because that's the area where the hummingbird starts blurring at the edges, because they're moving. They may be the most still hummingbirds you've ever seen, but they are not still. They're still hummingbirds. I want to get that round ping pong, got a tank full for the trip south look. A little bit more feathering, pulling in the background. A lot of painting is with just plain clean water and whatever you put behind it. Just pulling color across, getting the rounded feel, but I don't want to do too much at once. I want to build this up in layers. And since this painting is a quick one, the layers, I still need to let them dry in the important areas. I use my fingers a lot with painting. You can't let the child go away completely. And actually, your fingers are about the most useful tool when you're looking for a rough blur. This painting took 51 minutes to do, and I've edited it down to make it small enough to watch. Mostly edited out fussy details and drying time. I want a pretty strong dark there, but I don't want it to be harsh at the same time. I'm looking for the contrast. There's the wing, and it's very active. It can't be harsh because it's not a steady shadow. And don't worry, I'm already planning on going in and blurring those wings a bit more later. Now, see, that's with the feathers. You always do your brush strokes with the shapes of the objects that you're trying to paint. So if I'm doing wings that are curved aerodynamically, then I let my brush strokes curve with the wings. I'm just pulling some of the paint in from out. Some of it's new, some phthalo green and ultramarine blue. I want to darken up that eye a couple times because they have those bright little eyes. And I'm not worrying about anything on the whites because I'll show you a trick. Now it's dried a bit, a couple more darks. And see how much lighter it's dried. Still looks light. So obviously you have to layer and layer and layer. And a little sketch doesn't take very long, and maybe 3-4 layers. But a real painting would take 100 layers sometimes. It really just depends on what you're doing. More ultramarine blue, just put on with a heavy hand. Lots of paint, but lots of water. You're not looking for sludge on there. You're looking for something that's fairly translucent still. Now look how that dark, dark background makes a little hummingbird glow. That's the effect I'm looking for. And all those greens back there, they're really showing up and showing the life and the color. Just let your brush move around and hit and miss. We're not doing a flat wash. I may look like I'm hitting all of it, but there's some areas that are more wet. And here now I've had the phthalo green bleed into it. Some areas are more wet, some are dry. Some I just kind of let some water puddle. This is on hot press paper, and the type of paper you're using does make a big difference. Hot press is best for bright, bright colors. It's lousy for texture. If you're wanting to paint an interesting stuccoed wall, hot press paper will be your enemy. If you're wanting to paint a jeweled hummingbird, perfect. Think about your paper and what it's going to do when you paint. See, I'm letting the colors just flow, and I'm not trying to do a lot of detail in the flowers. I don't want that detail in there. I want the detail in the hummingbird. Quinacridone gold is just a lovely color for that glow. Don't worry about anything really. Anything can be fixed, especially on hot press paper. Hot press paper, just you can move the paint around, you can pull it off, you can do anything with it. Very easy to paint on. But if you want to do that stucco wall, run away. See how it's shaping the shadows, but it's a loose shadow. And that's a trick because you don't want it. Little feathers, they don't have harsh edges. You want the fluffy little ping pong ball. See how it's starting to shape. It's getting there. I love especially how paintings change when they dry. It's a magical thing. Now notice up top I still have some pretty harsh lines. I'm going to want to change that contrast. doing a little bit of detail. Remember, one good round brush will do everything you need it to do. I usually use a 12 or a 14 round sable or squirrel, depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I, of course, have other brushes and I play with them, but you need one good brush. If you have a whole bunch of brushes on there, then you can't do one, go from a broad wash to a tiny little point in one stroke. You can't, the same brush doesn't do hummingbird eyes as does the big wash. You have much more control. Now my dinky little detail, all those little hummingbird feathers. Pulling some paint away from there, because usually in portraits of animals as well as people, there's a little bit of a glow underneath any objects. Actually, if you're painting an orange, it still has that glow. It's a little bit of reflection from the ground below, the table below, whatever. So you pull off a little bit of color. A little bit more detail around the eye. And notice this is doing something tiny, tiny like this is about the only time that I touch the metal ferrule of my brush. Usually I'm way back on that brush and working from my elbow rather than my wrist. Only dinky detail is for choking up on your brush, and even that I usually try to move back a little bit. More with the tiny little details. And there really is no way to build up the iridescent look than going over and over the same area, tiny little brush strokes. Pulling some of the paint in here, a little bit of dry brush. Hard to do on hot press paper. Well, pulling the shadow in. I love texture of rags. When I'm traveling, I'll use paper towels instead of rags, but rags really give you that kind of mottled look. Some nice warm shadows under the wing. Rubbing away the wing a little for some motion and pulling out that sparkle in the eye with an X-Acto blade. Be very careful at this stage. Don't wreck your painting. I hope this hummingbird painting inspires you to go out and paint. For more inspirations, check out my website at jenniferbranch.com. Happy painting!